Hey y'all, welcome to Parent Power with Mandy Drogin. I'm Mandy. I'm just a mom sitting down having real conversations with real Texans about what's going on in our state. Today, I'm so excited to be joined by Representative Brent Money from House District 2. Brent is a leader in the parent empowerment movement, and he's also a leader in the Sharia Free Texas movement. He started a caucus to take on the radical Islamists that are trying to take on our great state. Representative Money, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, let's dive into the impetus for you starting the Sharia Free Texas Caucus right here to fight back against the Islamist radicals. What started you on this path to take them on?
Yeah, I think the most recent thing was just at the federal level. Congressman Keith Self, my congressman, and Congressman Chip Roy started the Sharia Free America Caucus. We had been meeting with them and discussing some of the things they're trying to do at the state level, and just understanding that they can't do everything that we need done, right, from a federal standpoint. So, but I would say it started probably about a year and a half ago when Alan Schoolcraft called a bunch of, he's a representative from San Antonio, and he called a group of us together during the session and said, hey, what are we going to do about this? Mm-hmm. And so I give him the credit for kind of starting it. And we started meeting once a week and just reading, talking with experts, discussing news stories, and trying to figure out what needs to be done. And so that went on for about a year before we actually started a formal caucus.
Yeah, well, that's great. And I'm glad Representative Schoolcraft brought y'all together and that you picked up the torch to make sure that this is a formal plan and group of individuals willing to take this on. We started looking at it here at the foundation a couple years ago as well when we saw the infiltration into our public education system. We're talking about those with ties to terrorist organizations that were starting charter schools actually in Irving, Texas, using public dollars to start and educate students and receiving content from the Qatar Foundation, which is a direct nonprofit arm of the Qatari government, who is the largest funder of Hamas. And when this was brought to my attention, I just thought, why is no one really talking about this? And it feels like this issue has exploded, and more Texans recognize the civilizational threat to our nation, to the free world. So can you talk about what you're hearing? I know that you're out everywhere. I see you on social media. I can see everybody talking about this. What are you hearing from Texans now that this issue has really been brought to the forefront? And I would say the past year or so.
Yeah, I say there's two kind of messages that come through over and over and over again. And one is, do something about this. Why is nobody doing something about this? Yeah. And then the other message is, there's nothing you can do about this because it's a religious freedom issue, which I think is a misunderstanding both of Islam and of what religious freedom was intended to do. But that is kind of the juxtaposition that we are in, trying to sort out how in a country that grants religious freedoms, or I won't say protects religious freedoms. Right. How do we combat this particular issue? Right. Because and the answer is, Islam is not really a religion. It is religious in a sense, but it is a full civilizational ideology. It's legal, it's political. The Quran is their constitution. It supersedes any kind of law of man. And so how do you coexist with someone that refuses to coexist with you? Right. So that's where we're struggling and where we have to win.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and we're seeing this. I think we're seeing this. We talk about the red-green or the Marxist-Islamist alliance that have truly weaponized our First Amendment freedom of religion, right? And we know that our nation was founded on biblical values. Both the Old and New Testament were referenced. In fact, Deuteronomy was referenced more times than any other document in history from our founders. And so you've got the communist side that says really freedom from religion, right? They're trying to say we cannot mention, and that's a weaponization of our rights as Christians to talk about our faith and the influence of the Bible in our system of government, as our founders obviously did. But then you've got these Islamists that are trying to insert their vision, which, as you said, I mean, it's ultimately to establish a caliphate across the entire world. And so they've weaponized that ability, claiming religion as their freedom. But the reality is that you just hit on it. They are setting up businesses to funnel money. They are massive recipients of welfare and entitlement programs, but they're also creating their own, it's almost like court systems, banking systems. Can you talk a little bit about that and how that's influencing communities surrounding them? I mean, EPIC really became, the East Plano Islamic Center became kind of the main focal point for a while. But the truth is, it's everywhere. You've got River Valley, you've got Irving, they're setting up these compounds. So what are you seeing and hearing in these spaces?
Yeah, and I think people need to understand this is not random. It's not accidental. This is the plan. There is a two-front war happening from the Muslim Brotherhood. And one is to get in and infiltrate our systems and institutions. That's one side. And the other side is to build these Muslim-only enclaves where people can go their entire lives without dealing with non-Muslims and not interacting with our legal system in any way. And the Muslim Dawa, which is their immigration plan, that has it's in the Quran and the Hadiths, and it has been in place for 1,400 years. It is immigrate, populate, agitate, dominate. And so,
can you say that again?
Immigrate, populate, agitate, dominate. And that has been the plan and how it is being executed. And you're watching this across Europe. First, you immigrate and you blend in. And you become doctors and dentists and bankers and, part of the PTA, and you're just normal. And then populate. We've got to just build our numbers. And then once you think you have some numbers, you start to agitate. You push and see where you can get away with things. And when people push back, then you claim victimhood and you call it Islamophobic. And this is all part of it. The victimhood narrative is huge in Islamic history. And that's where it blends so well with the communists, right. Which is all set up on this oppressor oppressed. So the communists have kind of come in and catechized everyone that we should all be separated into the oppressors and the oppressed. And then the Muslims come in and say, oh, look at how oppressed we are. And that gives them elite status.
Right.
And so all of this is happening at once. And it's happening because there's just a vacuum of Christians doing what we should be doing, which is spreading the gospel and speaking truth and being involved in politics and those kinds of things. And we have allowed our country, which was built on these biblical foundations and values, to be eroded by people who don't believe those values.
Right. I think that's a perfect explanation. And I mean, that's ultimately what Muhammad did, right? When he went from Mecca to Medina, it was exactly that, immigrate, and then say it again. It's immigrate, populate,
yeah. Agitate,
dominate. And that's what he did when he went to Medina,
Correct.
Right? He was an outsider. He claimed that he had all these followers, that the Jews in Medina would follow him because he was a prophet, all of these things. Gets there, and the Jews are like, no, you're not. He went on the fringes of society, which is exactly what the Marxists
Correct.
do, right? They go and get those that feel like that they're not a part of the society, and then they agitated, and this was within just a couple years. They started caravans, they started robbing people, they started, doing whatever they could, and they claimed victimhood status to survive. Then they went in and they agitated, and then they dominated. And effectively, they took over Medina, and that was how the spread of Islam, the political ideology, as you touched on, to take over and control spread, right?
So this is so important. When you hear Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York City, talk about, hey, Muhammad himself was an immigrant. And so, okay, well, let's tell that story.
Right.
He left Mecca because no one would really buy into what he was selling. He was there for 12 or 13 years and he built up a very small following. They never got anything. So he goes to Medina, a Jewish city with 3 different Jewish sects or tribes, and he kind of ingratiated himself to the non-Jews there, the minority.
Yeah.
And within 5 years of him arriving, he became a little bit of a political power there with the marginalized. Within 5 years, there was not a single Jew left in Medina. He
killed them.
They drove out the first smaller tribe, and the other tribes looked and said, okay, well, good. They were always kind of a problem. And then he drove out the second largest one. And then the biggest one was like, okay, good. Now we're the only Jews in Medina. And then shortly thereafter, they besieged that group for 28 days. And when they finally surrendered, they cut the heads off of all the men and sold all the women and children into slavery.
Sex slavery.
Yes.
Yes,
yes,
to be clear.
Yes, sex slavery. And then there's no Jews left in Medina. So that is the immigration plan. And remember, Muhammad, I think dozens of times in the Quran is called the perfect man. He is the person that they are supposed to emulate. Mm-hmm. This is, and so it's a horrific story, but it is also, it is their pattern of how they're supposed to engage with society.
And we're watching this play out right now. I think that the UK, well, all of Europe is a harbinger, right? We're sitting here watching.
Yes.
Because they're not having to cross the Atlantic Ocean. They're crossing minor oceans, Mediterranean coming, and they have spread. There's been a diaspora across Europe, and we're watching them grapple with doing exactly what the plan is, the dawah is to go in. You've got no-go zones, meaning Sharia has taken over, right?
Correct.
And we just saw the absolutely horrific gang rape reports where they're setting up these rape gangs. They're grooming young girls. It was over 250.
Hundreds of thousands, yes.
Hundreds of thousands of young innocent girls being groomed and then being raped by predators with a culture that has promoted that since the beginning, to be clear, going in and taking, you just said it, sex slaves, that this is their right to do. And we're watching this play out in real time.
Right.
So let's talk
Once again, Muhammad, according to what he says, Allah told him you can have up to 4 wives and as many sex slaves as your right hand possesses. Right. So as many as you can capture.
Right. That they were capturing them,
yes,
right? That was the whole thing, is go and capture women who preferably are not Muslim.
Correct.
Right.
Because that's the way that their religion advances. Is through power and procreation. And so it's not like we think of religious advancement by we sit down and we have a talk and I show you my scriptures and we pray together and we work through and the Holy Spirit changes your heart and you become a Christian. They'd be fine if you convert that way. But they are moving toward a militaristic political overtake of the entire world as an Islamic state.
Right. Because you get 3 chances. I had a wonderful former Iranian who fled. She is a proud American citizen, but she fled when, going back to the Marxist Islamist alliance, when the Islamists partnered with the stupid Marxists that think the utopia can occur and overthrew the Shah, and the Revolutionary Guard took over and effectively, dropped black sheets on the women for, and so she was talking about that. What happens is you get 3 chances. To your point, you can convert. We'll show you the Quran, but if you don't after 3 chances, then we can take you as a slave, charge you the jizya tax.
Jizya tax, yes.
Or take you as a sex slave, charge you the jizya tax,
if
or kill you.
If you don't pay the tax, then we'll just kill you. We gave, and I've heard imams in English, in the UK or America say, we already gave you 2 other good options. If you're not going to convert or pay the tax, then we have to kill you because we gave you two good options and you didn't choose them.
Okay. So all right. So when we're here and we talk about the greatest constitution that has ever existed, with the Bill of Rights that protects individuals for their religious choices to worship the God that they want to worship or no worship at all, that the state cannot come in and mandate a religion. That was the intention. But what is happening, as we said, particularly in our education system, is twofold. One, For example, here in Austin, we saw the Austin City Council push to recognize Muslim Celebration Week or month. I don't really remember. They seem to just hand out these months like rainbow Skittles as to all the rainbow and diversity grievance crowd. But they handed that out, and then they recognized Eid-al-Fitr, and then not simultaneously, but close on the heels, within a year and a half, 2 years, Austin ISD gets rid of Good Friday, the day that our Lord and Savior died on the cross for our sins. They get rid of that as a holiday where we are a Christian nation, predominantly, children understand or should understand a basic understanding of what Good Friday is. They kick out Good Friday, but they keep Eid-al-Fitr. And this indoctrination that is occurring with those leftists and with the Islamists to push the ideology, or at least the acceptance of it, into our youngest minds. Talk to us about why it's so important that we're paying attention what's going on in the public square, but also in the education system, where they're bringing in content from, again, Qatar Foundation, which is directly tied to funding Hamas. But also we're training teachers. We're having our world culture courses that are being taught by these nefarious entities. Talk to us about why that's so important, particularly as the parent empowerment movement is all about transparency. I mean, that's what we talk about, and you and I have talked about before. Why is it so important that Texans understand what's occurring in the education sector?
Yeah, I think everybody in history understands that children are moldable and shapeable, and that if you want to change a society, that's the way that you do it. It's from the Bible, talking about how you're supposed to teach and train your children and the way that they should go. But it's the nefarious people understand it as well, and so we should always be paying attention to education, not just now, but they have particularly focused on this, and the Marxists and to some extent the Islamists, they can't build the society that they want here in America, but until after they destroy what is already here. And so when Charlie Kirk says things like, Islam is not compatible with the West, what that really means is Islam is not compatible with Christendom. The West is Christendom. It was built on centuries of Christian beliefs, morals, and understanding of the way that the world is. And you can't just plop Islam down on top of that. Right. It won't work. You have to infiltrate it, degrade it to a point where nobody really remembers it. And basically the communists just started, a century ago, eroding that away. There was a time in our history where it would have been, it would have been ridiculous to say that you're not allowed to read a Bible at school. Like, that was what schools were for. Right. That's why schools existed. Yeah. There were not going to, the reason there were schools in America is to teach kids to read the Bible for themselves. And so when Thomas Jefferson was president of the United States, he was also the first chairman of the board of the District of Columbia Public Schools. And he got to pick the reading curriculum for the kids, and he picked the King James Bible and the Isaac Watts hymnal. That was it. That was their textbooks. And so Mr. Separation of Church and State, when he was in charge of the schools, said, give the kids a Bible and a Christian hymnal. That's how they're going to learn to read. The schools, the public schools in America, were so Protestant that the Catholics started their own line of parochial schools. I've always wondered myself, the Christian school movement started in the 70s, 1970s, but these parochial schools have been around forever. And I went kind of on a deep dive to figure out why. And the reason why is because the Catholics were like, our kids are going to turn Protestant if they go to the public schools. And I say that to really just say, I think that we need to remind or teach the people like me who have grown up in a purely secular public school world that it wasn't always this way, and it doesn't have to always be this way. There was a time when, using the exact same Constitution that we have today, public schools were overtly Christian in the way that they did that. And there were no forced conversions. We're not checking to see if people are going to church or whatever. But that's just the air that was breathed in those schools, because that was the air that was breathed in the country as a whole. And parents expected that and demanded that of their school districts or their school houses. Yeah. And it has become just a big corporate secular, like we'll just wipe any religiosity out of it.
Yeah.
And I hope that people are starting to look and see, yeah, this doesn't work. Because one more thing, people, it became popularized kind of coming out of COVID, like, education, not indoctrination. I've said it. I'm sure you've said it, all this. But the truth is, all kids are being indoctrinated all the time, everywhere that they go. I mean, by whatever, because they're sponges, they learn whatever. And that's why God gave them parents, to teach them what the parents know and believe. And we have to be, so they're going to be indoctrinated. Mm-hmm. What is going to be doing the indoctrination? Who is going to be doing the indoctrination? Do we believe in parents as the best ones to do that? Or do we believe in some other system? And if you as a parent say, no, I'm going to trust this school to do it, then you better get engaged and you better be there and make sure that your kids are being indoctrinated with the kinds of things that you want them to be indoctrinated with. They are being indoctrinated. And so anyway, I got it on a rant there.
No, it's wonderful. And I want to just add in a couple of details that are so important. And it goes into what you're talking about. You talked about how the rise in Christian, specifically private schools, did not really start occurring into the 70s. And it's because the Warren Court, a very far leftist judge who became the justice of the Supreme Court, Warren is his name, and we call it the Warren Court. Yeah, Earl Warren. And he is the one who pushed forth the removal of praying or any references to biblical content. And not only was it destructive to the fabric and the general understanding, but it was destructive to history and literature as a whole, because what happened, and Texas is taking this on, and you've been helpful and a part of this, what we just did at the State Board of Education level. But what the Warren Court did was effectively say freedom from religion, meaning Christian faith, and being able to talk about Christian faith. And as you noted, and Charlie talked about this all the time when he talked about it's incompatible, it's because literally our system of government, our standards of morality, and our legal system is set up based on the Bible. And I've heard this and been asked this multiple times about why do we have the 10 Commandments in classrooms? Well, it's because that is the basis for canon law, which is our legal system. And you go back, and whether it's John Locke or William Blackstone's commentaries on the English law, which is the basis for American law, still cited today at the Supreme Court level. That is all based on canon law. It is all based on the Bible. And he made that abundantly clear. So when you don't talk about the biblical influence, which has not been occurring because everybody's been, we can't do that. We're in the public space. That is not what, as you said, Mr. Separation of Church and State meant. He meant that the state cannot come in and regulate faith and force any faith, but it was not the removal. So Texas took this on. We are the first state in the union that has said Warren Court, Earl Warren was completely wrong. We absolutely have to teach the historical and cultural references in both our literature and history standards. And the entire country, I say the entire world, is watching this play out. Why is it so important that parents get involved and stand up for their students, their children, knowing our history and the biblical influence?
Yeah, because if you don't, who will? That's it. Right now, we are still in Texas. A majority of people identify as Christian, whether they attend church regularly or not, or read their Bible at home or not. They identify as Christian, and they say, yeah, this is it. That doesn't just automatically carry on to the next generation and the next. It has to be cultivated and taught. And we've definitely seen an erosion since the Warren Court. So there will be parents and grandparents watching this. Your kid's school is not the same as your school was. My dad remembers praying in praying when he was in school. And I think it was Engel versus Vitale in 1962 that took that out. But the school children used to start every day with a prayer,
right?
And it was part of what it was. There's a great actual quote from Earl Warren. I don't have it memorized, but from 1952 National Prayer Breakfast, where he lays out this is a Christian country. He even acknowledged this is a Christian country in every respect, and then yet just legally gutted it out of our school system. And so parents, one of the things I would say is just because Earl Warren said that in the 40s, 50s, and 60s doesn't mean we have to accept that today. Right. And you look back at what our founders' original intent was. When John Adams said that our Constitution was made for a moral and religious people, and remember, everyone was Christian then. Everyone was Christian. So what he was talking about was people who actually believe it, people who are really there. And so he wasn't talking about just any religion. Right. He was talking about Christian, pietistic, moral, religious people, and it's wholly inadequate for the governing of any other. So our Constitution presumes that we will have a Christian people, and if we don't, it's not going to work. Like the Constitution will not work in a secularist society or a polytheistic society,
or an Islamist society,
or an Islamist society, and the Islamists will completely ignore it every chance that they get.
Right.
And so, you need to be worried about it because your kids are going to be worried about it.
And they're going to be indoctrinated with it. We've seen multiple circumstances where you touched on this, where you're getting Islamists that are joining the PTA. They are coming to the State Board of Education to testify, and they play the victim. Again, we watched this at the State Board of Education where CARE was literally busing in people to testify, and they couldn't help themselves because they are conditioned to, if they're questioned something about the Quran, to say that it is the greatest book, it is the this, it is the that. But then they will fall back into, but we just want diversity and for our perspective to be told. And I was asked this, I think it's the New York Times that asked me, and they said, well, don't we need to be representative? And I said, no. I said, Islam did not build the West. You can go look at 50 plus countries and see how they're operating. And yet anybody that can flee from them do, because women are oppressed. Anyone with alternative lifestyles are murdered. And it is a theocracy. You submit to the leaders that claim the authority on behalf of the Quran to control every aspect of your life. And that is something that
I would say
we need to know.
Yeah, you said you submit, and Islam actually means submit.
That's right.
But it's not like the willing submission that you might have to your husband's leadership or something like that. It is subjugation.
Right.
It is absolute violent authority over the top of it. And so I don't want that here.
Right.
Sorry, it's bad.
Yeah.
And does that mean every Muslim that is in America is bad? No, absolutely not. The people that believe what the Quran teaches and the Hadith teaches, they're bad.
Let's go into that, because we hear this all the time, that there are peaceful Muslims that want to live in America and participate in our society, standards of government, structure of legal system. What do you say when someone addresses you and says, well, I know a good Muslim, my doctor is a Muslim. How do you address that when we're talking about those that maybe do not want to overthrow the United States government and install a caliphate? What is your response?
Yeah. And I do think there are very sincere people who came here to flee the kind of Sharia law that we are trying to fight against.
Yeah.
The problem is in the Islamic faith itself, it teaches taqiyya. And taqiyya is a doctrine that says that it is permissible to lie when the objective that you're trying to achieve is permissible. And it is obligatory to lie when the mission that you're trying to achieve is obligatory. The obligatory mission is to establish an Islamic state. So they are required, and I think the most common verse, I think it's in chapter 3, verse 48 or something of the Quran. I could be a little off, but there's a number of these quotes in there. But you are supposed to lie and make them believe that you are blending in until you have enough power to overtake them. That's their doctrine. And so I don't know. You're sitting across from someone at a coffee or a lunch, and they're like, I just sincerely want to be here. I think that's great. They might be telling the truth, but you don't know, because they're doing exactly what the Quran tells them to do if they're trying to establish an Islamic State. And it's not my fault that their religious text says that they're supposed to lie to me. Okay, well, I read that, and now I don't believe you. And so that creates a trust barrier between me and you when throughout Christian history, martyrs have died to say, I will not lie and denounce my faith.
Right.
But in Islam, they're required to do that to an extent in order to overtake us. And so I don't know. I mean, I do believe that there are casual Muslims, just like there are casual Christians who, kind of that's how they identify, and it's part of who they
Muslims.
are. They don't really believe all that stuff. They may not even know that all that stuff is in the Quran. But when the ones that do start to move, whose side are the others going to be on? That's the question. And
that's what we see, playing out right now. I mean, that's what's happened, again, since Muhammad started his wars and raids. He participated in 83 wars and raids to spread his theocracy.
Right.
But we're watching it play out, particularly in Africa.
All in about 10 years of his life, too.
Yeah.
He was a nobody for the first 40 years. And then for the next 12 or 13 years, he was in Mecca trying to become a religious leader. And then the last 10 years of his life, he was this warmongering, rapist pedophile that was just ravaging everything he could find. And so, when you say 83 raids, that's a lot, but that was in a small time. That was in a small period of time.
But it hasn't stopped. And this is when we talk about what's being taught in our classrooms, and this was really important when we were looking at the standards that were being put out to be taught, and CARE, the designated terrorist group, bust a whole bunch of people in to testify and complain that the entry point, Christendom goes back 2,500 years and built the West, right? But they were complaining that when the entry point of Islamists was the expansion by the sword, murdering Christians and taking over Christian lands. We look back at Lebanon and Egypt and pretty much every country that surrounds the Mediterranean, they were Christian. And Muhammad took them over, and we're witnessing it play out to this day. So we are at 1,800 years later, and we can see that Nigeria has been completely decimated. Their Christians are being murdered up into, I just saw a report from last week where they went into a church and just slaughtered them all. And so that is important, but they'll say, that's not us. That's the fringe. And so something that's important when we're talking about history is being able to point out that's not us, that's the fringe. We've heard this throughout history, whether it's the peaceful, loving Germans that didn't think that would say Hitler's not us and taking over and gassing 6 million Jews and killing millions of others, or Mao and his Revolutionary Guard, that's not us, but we saw the 50 million that he starved and murdered. Stalin and Lenin, that's not us. We see the people. And I think we're watching it right now that you say, oh, well, that's just a small fringe, a 10 to 20% of the makeup of, but we see the destruction that can occur if good people like yourself and those that are a part of the Sharia Free Texas Caucus don't say, hold on a second, we're going to tell the truth about what's going on, right? Yeah. If you don't address what they call the small fringe percentage.
Yeah, and I don't know how small it is. I don't know how large it is. I just know that I've done enough enough history. I'm going to keep doing it, but I've done enough history to know that this always ends violently. And I want to try to catch it before it gets violent. And
so how do we do that?
yeah, so we need to find political means. I'm a legislator. I'm not a general. I'm not a, I don't work in border enforcement or immigration or anything like that. So we have people here who disagree with us in the way that Texas or America should be governed. How do we do that? Well, we need to, in some ways, we need to assert what we believe, and we need to continue to push, as the SBOE is doing. We need to reaffirm that we are a Christian nation in ways that, in the ways that we can. And once again, I'm not talking about forcing Christianity on people. I'm talking about teaching Christianity to people.
History, the
historically,
influence, right?
This is what Christianity is, what built America.
Right.
And you can disagree with that, and you are wrong.
Right.
Like it's objectively true. And so we should be teaching that to our children unapologetically, and we should be shouting it from the rooftops. And we should be, if we would actually believe what we believe as fervently as they believe what they believe, then we would have a much better world. Second, we need to go after the terrorist networks. You talked about the funding. All of this is being funded by terrorism, for terrorism. That is where this is coming from.
Yeah.
There is a reason why around half of Muslim Americans have a favorable view of Hamas. I don't have a favorable view of Hamas.
Yeah.
I have a very unfavorable view. They are being taught that what Hamas is doing aligns with what they think.
And they were victims.
Yes. That's
it. It's that intersectional will of grievance is that Hamas is just the victim.
Hamas is the victim. They've been so oppressed.
Yes.
And so, we need to stop the funding of our institutions by foreign actors. We need to be able to run down where that money is going. We said we would talk about the explanatory memorandum.
Yes.
Okay.
And you want to jump into that?
Yeah,
okay. The Muslim Brotherhood's explanatory memorandum. Explain that.
This goes into what their playbook is. So there was a playbook put together by the Muslim Brotherhood in America back in the 80s and 90s. It was actually discovered post 9/11 there was a woman in traditional Muslim garb that was taking pictures and video of the structural portions of the Chesapeake Bay Bridge. And she was stopped by law enforcement, say, "Hey, what are you doing? See something, say something." So she stopped. They stopped. They did. The person with her had a warrant for terroristic activities out of Chicago. They did a search warrant of their apartment, and found, among other things, all these documents from the Muslim Brotherhood in America. And one of these was the explanatory memorandum. This is a memorandum, and it's not just what this guy wrote. He put in there something along the lines of, I'm writing this, but this is what we all agreed to in our last annual meeting. This is, and the purpose was to explain what settlement meant in America. I'm going to read a quote, if you don't mind.
Please do.
And so it's the whole memorandum. It's pretty thin. It's easy to read. Once they translate it into English, but it's easy to read. You can buy it on Amazon for $5. But it talks about how they're planning to settle America, and they talk about settlement.
Take over. When you say settle, this means take over America, to take over the Christian country that are the defenders of the free world. That's Correct. What they say settle. That's what it means.
This is what they say that settlement means.
Okay.
The process of settlement is a civilization jihadist process, with all that word means. The Ikhwan, which is the Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood, must understand that their work in America is a kind of grand jihad in eliminating and destroying the Western civilization from within and sabotaging its miserable house by their hands and the hands of the Muslim believers, so that it is eliminated and Allah's religion is made victorious over all other religions. Without this level of understanding, we are not up to this challenge and have not prepared ourselves for jihad yet. It is a Muslim's destiny to perform jihad and work wherever he is and wherever he lands until the final hour comes, and there is no escape from that destiny except for those who choose to slack.
Wow.
That was found. It became a piece of evidence in the Holy Land Foundation trial here in Dallas, which is the largest terrorist financing trial and conviction in American history in 2007. Mm-hmm. In that trial, they identified 246 unindicted co-conspirators to this terroristic financing, and we have not gone after any of those because as soon as Obama got in 2008, he stopped all the investigations, all the prosecutions, everything, and those 246 individuals and organizations that were identified as part of the Muslim Brotherhood, as part of this civilization jihadist process to take over and eliminate, Western civilization from within, were allowed to just continue operating.
Co-conspirators, hundreds of them, have had decades because I would say the absolutely evil Obama administration that bought into this intersectionality wheel of victimhood, and anyone that has more melanin than you and I somehow falls into that. Yeah. And they said, do not go after these terrorists. That's what happened.
That is exactly what happened.
And they live amongst us in Texas.
They do. And one of the imams that was, maybe he's not an imam, I don't know. There was someone named in the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm not going to try to butcher his Arabic name. But in the explanatory memorandum, he is named by name as a person who is in charge of the education of the children. He is active and involved in Katy, Texas right now, spinning off Muslim student associations and all of that throughout Texas. That is his job. That's what he's doing for the Muslim Brotherhood. There are probably Muslim student associations at every university in Texas and at almost every high school in Texas. And that is his brainchild. And he's in the explanatory memorandum as the person for the Muslim Brotherhood in charge of destroying us from within.
So Senator Cruz put forth the TRACE Act, which would be to at least know where content, information, teacher training, and whatnot is coming from, and parents being made aware if it's coming from hostile foreign nations, such as China. We know they did Confucius Institutes, but also from entities like the Qatar Foundation, which they've closed down. But I don't know any terrorist that just, willingly gives up and closes down. So I don't believe any of that. But to put content into our classrooms to indoctrinate our students, American students, to be willing, to accept civilizational suicide, in my opinion. And so, but how can we, and we want to go further here at TBPF, we want to see that we completely reject, you cannot have foreign funding or foreign content being put into any of our public institutions. What should happen? So first off, we should go after those 240 plus co-conspirators. I'm sure there's thousands more now if we truly looked into it.
Yes, I don't. And so one of the things that I'm looking into is our sedition, our Texas sedition statutes, and are they strong enough? Are they specific enough? Certainly, I don't see a lot of prosecutions of those. So, what is it that it needs to happen to make sure that we do have freedom of speech, but we don't have the kind of speech that incites people to overthrow the government is not the kind of speech that we should be allowing.
Correct.
And so, trying to do that within our constitutional structure and framework, yes.
Can Texas go after those co-conspirators that are here? Because to be clear, you said it, but I just want to reiterate it. In the night when the Holy Land report and prosecutions, only a few were actually prosecuted. It was in Texas. It was based out of Dallas, Texas, where we know that there are multiple sects from the Day of Bandy to a whole host of others that are in operation there. Can we go? Do we know, is there a statute of limitations? Because again, these people are starting schools, and that to me is the most evil component about it. Yuri Bezmenov from the Soviet Union said that the way that their plan, the communist plan to take over America, was to come in and demoralize, basically talk about how terrible our culture is and how we are oppressed, particularly women, and then destabilize with protests and shootings and violence and whatever. And then for the government to come in and take over to on the crisis front, create a crisis, come in, take over, and then normalize with the government control. Now, they were thinking this was how the communists would take over, but it sounds like this is exactly what the Islamists are utilizing as well. And it all starts in our classrooms. So can we as Texans go after, in particular, those that are infiltrating our public schools, any school that are radicalizing American citizens with seditious mindsets and activities?
Right. There are things right now that we can be doing and should be doing with our existing laws.
Yep.
We need full enforcement of the laws that are already on the books starting immediately. Mm-hmm. We also need to look at and talk with our law enforcement agencies, with our attorney general, with our local prosecutors. Okay, where are their gaps? Where are there problems where you're like, well, yeah, this is definitely something that should be wrong, but I can't prosecute them under this. We need to fix those things. And we're having those conversations and communications.
When you say under this, like freedom of religion, they try and they weaponize.
Yeah. And sometimes our statutes were built to stop one particular thing. And it was written in the 1950s. And now we have a different threat and different, and so we might need to tweak or make sure that our statutes do what they need to do. That's part of it. We have, I've had some conversation with Mays Middleton, who will be our incoming AG. I think he gets this issue. I think he understands the threat. And so we need to get in there and say, what can the state do that it's not doing? We need, you ask about statute of limitations in 2007 or whatever. I don't know about that, but what I would say is they haven't stopped.
Right.
So like
they've only grown.
We might not be able to prosecute them for things they did in 2005 and 2006. Yeah. But we're going to have to start new investigations and find out what they're doing in 25 and 26 and prosecute based on those things. And so, there's going to need to be funding for that. There's going to need to be, task force appointed for that and getting those people that really mean to do us harm prosecuted.
What can local governments do now? Everybody across the country is talking about this, but really Texas is the hotbed. We pay a lot of attention to what's going on in Minnesota and other places, but this is where the organizers, the leaders of these evil Islamist dominated cults, if you will, really operate from. So what can locals do now to help, whether it's local citizens that are watching this play out or local governments that feel like they don't have the authority? What can they be doing now with what's on the books and or to help the legislature when y'all are in making actual laws to try and quelch this, this attempt to take over Texas, and ultimately, as goes Texas, so will go America. Right. What can the locals do?
I've been having some communications with locals as well. One of the things that they can do is identify those tools that they need. Mm-hmm. They feel helpless, and in large part because the state has removed a lot of local control levers over the past decade or so. Because you had cities, particularly big cities, that were such bad actors. It's like, well, then we're not going to give you the authority to do that anymore. Right. And now, because they don't have they abuse the authority, and now they don't have the authority, and so we need to figure some of that out at the state level, because mm-hmm. really, locals are always going to be the front lines. That's mm-hmm. where they're going to go to get plats approved and building permits and things like that. The ones that are being successful right now are just scrupulously following the rules that are there and standing and saying no when all those rules are not meticulously followed, and saying, I don't care if you sue us, we are going to say no. Mm-hmm. That takes a lot of courage. Mm-hmm. It takes money. It takes good lawyers on your side. And a lot of times it's easier just to go, Okay, well, what are we supposed to do? I admire the ones that are saying we don't care what the cost is. We understand what the threat is.
Yeah.
And so, stand firm, stand strong. Make sure that the rules that are in place are meticulously followed. And if they aren't followed, then don't allow it.
Before we wrap up, I want you to look in that camera right there and talk to the parents and the patriots of Texas about why this civilizational threat will impact the next generation and America to come, and why they must get involved in fighting back against the Islamists that are radically trying to change the way Texas and America operates.
You heard the words that I said about the civilization jihad. We are watching that play out across Europe. We have the horrific rape gangs, a report that just came out with Rupert Lowe and in the UK. Our children are at risk. We are at risk. And we are going to have to do things that are difficult and complicated and uncomfortable. But if we're not willing to do and say difficult and uncomfortable things, then our children are going to be left to endure violent things. And it is up to us to do what needs to be done to ensure that that doesn't happen. I'm not ready to sit here and see if Texas can be the first place in the last 1,400 years where this kind of radical, violent ideology can coexist in a Christian world. It hasn't happened before. I don't think Texas will be the first place, and we have to figure out how to root it out.
Representative Money, thank you for standing firm for Texas and for America in drawing attention to this growing threat. Thank you for joining us today on Parent Empowerment with Mandy Drogin, and now you have the power.